I think we'll get started because I know some people are busy, some people are at work. But my name is Brent Sheldon, and I am the Public Safety Chairman of the Jamestown City Council Committee. Our committee, the Public Safety Committee, has been tasked with police reform here in the city of Jamestown. We have been having a series of what we call stakeholders meetings, different groups of people who might have different interests within the city. We've had a faith-based meeting. We've had an African-American group meeting, 2 different sets of schools. And then we had a not-for-profit meeting yesterday. So this is the mental health healthcare meeting. And just go around the room here. Everybody can introduce themselves. And if you could just kind of let us know what your interest in mental health or healthcare is, if you're actually in that service industry, or if you have a family relationship or a personal experience. So start up in the left corner with Vicki there.
Vicki James, City Council member. I do have a couple of relatives who have some serious mental health issues, and my heart goes out to the workers because it's a very difficult and challenging job that you have. So, and thank you for being a part of this.
I can go next. I'm Sarah Gilbert. I work at the Chautauqua Center in Jamestown. So we're a mental health service provider, and I appreciate being invited to. I have some personal experience, some family members. I myself am diagnosed, so I hope I have something to offer today.
I'll go next. My name's Christine Melise. I am retired, and I'm a former consultant at WCA Hospital. I worked there for over 40 plus years, and I'm familiar with the inpatient and outpatient dynamics in a facility of that size. I have also had family members and a friend that are having some issues. So this is of interest to me.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Melissa Paternitti, and the reason that I'm here is to try to help provide some input from personal experiences I've had growing up in the city of Jamestown with a severely mentally ill mother from the age of 2nd grade. My mother was diagnosed with bipolar in many facilities in the city of Jamestown, as is Gwanda. I feel very strongly about this subject. I think that children get lost through the cracks, and I'm here to advocate for the children of the city of Jamestown.
I'll jump in. Jeff Russell from Jamestown City Council. I have interest in this topic just due to the simple fact that, I was being a police officer for 23 years. I dealt with a lot of mental health issues in this community and had a lot of contacts as a result.
Carol Wright. I've been in the field for 30 years, currently supervising outpatient mental health, drug and alcohol program, and a team of care coordinators. I've worked in many arenas in the mental health field throughout my career, including WCA, the Resource Center, inpatient, outpatient, emergency room, and school-based services.
Recognize yourself.
Everyone, I'm Stephen Cobb. I'm the director at the Mental Health Association. We're a peer-run organization that provides recovery supports on mental health and the substance use disorder side, and we also support family and friends and loved ones who are supporting people in recovery. I have my own lived recovery experiences on the mental health side and on the substance use disorder side. So very happy to be here with you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carl France. I work at Casadega Job Corps. I'm a duty officer up there. I don't have any degrees or anything in mental health, but I myself have suffered with mental health my whole life. And a lot of the students that we deal with up there are suffering from some sort of trauma and mental health issues. So, and most of our kids are African American. So I wanted to be a part of this.
And I'm Linnea Carlson. I'm currently the manager of the Jamestown Public Market, but I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have worked with the public in many instances with many individuals who suffer from mental health issues. I also have my own personal experience with mental health, as well as navigating the treatment options and what's offered here in Jamestown. So I'm excited to be a part of this committee.
Hi, I'm Misty Pennington. I'm a program coordinator with Chautauqua County Department of Mental Hygiene. I also am the current clinic director for the Dunkirk Behavioral Health Clinic. I have over 15 years of both mental health counseling, inpatient, outpatient, as well as CD counseling. And thank you for inviting me.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out and joining this conversation about police reform here in Jamestown. All right. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. This meeting is not being streamed live. It is being recorded, and it will be placed on the city's website for transparency purposes for anybody to view at that point. So just keep that in mind, I guess. But as I stated, we have had a series of meetings. We'll have a few more. Next week, there'll be a police and law enforcement stakeholders group. And then we hope to wrap it up with a couple of just general populations where people didn't really fit into a state group, but they're residents or they work in the city of Jamestown. They're interested in what's going on here and would like to have a little bit of input into what we're doing with police reform, which we've actually been working on it for the past couple of months. We think we're at a pretty good stage in this this process. We've heard some other cities are a little bit behind us, so we're going to keep plugging along because we're mandated to submit our findings and what we're going to do in the city of Jamestown by, I believe it's April 1st. Mayor, would you like to add anything before we get started?
Not too much, Brent. You covered it all. I just want to thank everyone for being on the call today and for helping to provide your input. These have been really informative and great phone calls or Zoom calls to talk about personal and business relationships that happen with our police. As we often describe our police department, is they're the first ones in, and they're also our last resort. And so there are a lot of different dealings that individuals have, and we want to make sure that our police department is being responsive as possible to our community and meeting its ever-changing needs. So I want to thank you all for being here. We've got a lot of change happening in the department and in the city, and so this is a great time. Brent and the rest of the folks here will guide you through some of the questions and provide any feedback. I want to let you know that we've been trying to make the city a bit more accessible. So you may see some live captioning happening. You can always turn that off by clicking on the live caption button and turning that off. But we do that for those that may have a little trouble hearing so that they can see. It is done through AI. It's not a live person typing those captioning, so they might be slightly off along the way. Other than that, I will be lurking in the background, listening in, and I want to say again, thank you all so much for being on the Zoom call today.
Thank you. Yeah, one example of funny closed captioning yesterday, Councilwoman Tamu Graham-Reinhardt mentioned Sheriff Joe Gerasi, and it came out, yep, there it is, Joe Rossi, Chef Joe Rossi. Kind of funny.
Chef job. George.
Yeah.
Oh,
So it's not always 100% accurate, but it's definitely helpful as a tool. So. Okay. All right, and I forwarded everybody 5 questions we're going to ask, and if we have time near the end, we'll ask another one, or if there's other information or other questions you have, we'll have time to answer those as well. As Councilman Russell mentioned, he is a retired police officer, so he does have some good insight into these. It's been very helpful in some of the other meetings we've had to discuss some of these information, these questions or answers to those. So we'll get started with the first question. What do you feel is the role of the local police department in our community here? I know there's a little hand raise button, but if you just want to speak, we don't have a very large group. I think we could just, everybody can just speak when they want. Anybody? I know some of you answered the survey question. Steve?
Yeah, I think primarily the role of the police is to keep the citizens safe. I think that's their first and their primary role in our community.
I'll go. I feel the role of the police department in the community is to serve and protect, meaning patrol, know, and guide. Patrol the community, know your residents, and guide your people in the right direction.
I'm going to jump on top of that as well. I feel the police department, they're here to ensure that the entire community not only is safe, but feels safe. And I think that's a little bit different. And I know they're working on it and trying it, but I think that everyone needs to feel safe, that they can call for assistance.
Yeah, I would echo that there is a big difference between one person or a group of people's interpretation of what it means to keep someone safe versus what that individual or group, what makes them feel safe. And I personally think the role of the police in our community is not only to keep us feeling safe and ensuring that we are safe, but doing so in a way that doesn't harm other groups, that it brings our community together. And yeah.
I think I would echo those things, in addition to, we all have things that we need to learn and grow and ask questions about. To also, while you're doing that, to be able to ask where you need to have education, to be greater informed onto those things you don't know. For instance, if I'm going someplace, and I have done in the past ride-alongs with the police department, frankly, if there's a situation that escalates, I have one skill set and they have the other, and we need both there sometimes. And so that collaboration piece, I think, is important, because I don't ever want to fire a weapon. And there's some things that I do that I think they probably don't ever want to do. But if we work together and understand we both have knowledge to gain from one another, I think that then, and I think that's why all the stakeholders are at the table today, but that allows for better community safety.
So I would just comment and say that I think most people know that the police are there to protect us and to keep us safe. But I think the perception that a lot of people have is fear of the police and fear that they're just out to get us. And I think a lot of the reason that is because of a lack of transparency and a lack of seeing all the good things that they do for us on a daily basis.
I think typically we call the police when there's a crisis. And when people are in crisis, the rules can go out the window for what to expect and how people behave. So I was kind of excited to hear about any kind of trauma-informed training that the police receive. What kind of negotiation training do they have in terms of de-escalating crises? I'm sure they have it, but that's an area that perhaps could be strengthened. I know myself that passed away among a group of kids who were afraid to call the police while my loved one was overdosing. And this goes way back. This was maybe 15 years ago. Back to that mentality where, you know, we don't want to call the police because we're afraid we'll get in trouble. And, you know, I would love to see any steps that we can take as a community to view the police as those who are there to help you and who can help resolve crises, instead of, I think sometimes our experience has shown that the police can escalate a crisis or create consequences that are unfair.
If I could just jump back in again, that reminded me of a situation I had last year. I ran out of gas up on Airport Hill, and it was snowing real bad. And when I could have called the police to like come help me or take me to the gas station to get gas, I walked all the way down from Airport Hill to the quick fill down there to get gas, and then walked back up to my car. And by the time I got there was a cop sitting outside my car, and he asked, well, why didn't you just call us? We would have helped you out. And I was like, well, I was afraid that I was going to get in trouble for something. So I would never think to call the police in that situation. Like, I just would do it on my own.
Jeff, do you want to jump in there a little bit about the training that the officers received?
Yeah, I won't sugarcoat it. I personally feel there needs to be more training for police officers on the mental health side. Obviously, there's basics that you receive when you're in the police academy. You're put through scenarios. You know, I guess people playing the part of different scenarios or situations. There are trainings that are constantly being made available at the department. They're often put on through the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Academy, or trainings out of the area. Basically what happens at the police department is they post these trainings in the squad room. People can sign up, you know, at will to go to these trainings. A lot of them are provided for free. Do I think there needs to be more and have it like an annual thing or semi-annual? Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that you can never have enough training, because
Absolutely.
You will respond in crisis situations the way you train, whether it be with a weapon or with a mental health situation or whatever, you're going to respond. So I think there needs to be more of it. And I think we need to work closer with the mental health side. I think at times when I was on the job, there was, you know, you'd find someone that was having a crisis, someone made a phone call or was threatening to jump off a bridge or whatever. And, you know, you as a police officer under the mental health law, you did a 941, you took them down to the police station or down to the hospital. Yeah. You dropped them off to a mental health counselor down there, handed them the paperwork, and you were out the door. Someone mentioned the overdose thing. I've heard that many times before, that people are afraid to call the police because they're afraid they're going to, or they wait to call the police, someone's overdosed, and they're too busy running around trying to clean up maybe drug paraphernalia or whatever that's on the scene, because they're afraid that, you know, they're going to get arrested if the police show up and there's needles there, or there's, you know, residue from heroin or whatever. I think it needs to get out there in the community that, you know, under the law, we, you know, in recent years, the police cannot arrest you for, if they come to a scene where there's an overdose and there's some needles laying there, or there's a bag of heroin or whatever, they are not going to arrest whoever's on the scene. They can't, and they shouldn't be. And those are recent changes, you know, in the past years, because exactly people were afraid to call the police and people were overdosing and dying. I talked to one local lady who lost her grandson to an overdose. And it was heartbreaking because there was a lapse of time where people that were at the scene at the overdose, they didn't call the police because they were worried about cleaning up the area because they were worried about getting in trouble with the police, and as a result, this young man or grandson ended up dying. And, there's a possibility that he could have been saved if someone would have called the police.
Do you think that all police officers even know that? I know all the average citizens don't know that, but I certainly have spoken to police officers. It seems like not everyone knows that. Is that possible?
I've been retired now from JPD for almost 3 years. It was coming down the pipeline when I was there that you didn't make an arrest. And I would hope that everyone, I can't speak for every single police officer in every single department, but when I was there, it was known that you don't do that. And you can't do it. And it was known when I was there, but since I left, there's been a lot of retirements, and there's a lot of new young police officers, and I would hope that that's been passed down to those officers.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Does the JPD go through the Sheriff's Academy at JCC?
For what?
To get a job, or do they, how do JPD get hired? Through the city, but they have to train where?
There's only one academy, and that's through JCC and through the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department. The Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department hosts the academy, and it's through JCC. So,
and how long is that?
6 months.
See, maybe that's where we need to start. How come that program's not a little bit longer with a little bit different training? Add, some mental health in there, add some different kind of training to help educate the community, or, stuff like that. 6 months doesn't seem like a very long time to learn how to, look at the military. You're in the military for 4 years, training every day and this and that. To me, 6 months doesn't seem like a lot. I don't know about anybody else.
If you look at the military boot camp is, some of them are only 10 or 12 weeks. The New York State Police Trooper Academy is also 6 months. And to get into the Sheriff's Academy, you have to have a minimum of 60 credit hours of college as well.
Okay, so the prerequisites have to be.
Yeah, you have a minimum of associate's degree to even get in. And like I said, I'm talking about when I went through the academy over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't sit here and say exactly what's being taught in the academy right now. They might be teaching more of this stuff. But a lot of the stuff that I learned from senior people, senior officers. You can't beat, I guess, some on-the-job training as well. I got to learn who the people were in town that, struggled with mental illness and how they kind of behaved and was able to build a rapport with some. And that goes a long way too, but obviously there needs to be more training on an annual or biannual basis. Like I said before, you can never beat training. You can't beat that. The more the better.
Almost like
I would be curious to know exactly what is touched upon when it comes to mental illness and dealing with crisis situations. I would be really curious to see if any of the current police officers are aware of trauma-informed care or have heard of that term, or motivational interviewing is another one that I think would be important. And as you said, Jeff, ongoing training is essential, and how can we have the JPD collaborate with MHA or, Prevention Works or even the Chautauqua Center to do biannual or annual trainings? Because, I mean, even in the 5 years since I graduated my master's program, you know, interventions change and, you know, best practices change. And I think having something set up where these officers are, you know, hey, this is mandatory that you go to this training, to keep them up to date on the best practices.
Sure, and I would encourage some of the local groups like MHA and or Chautauqua County Mental Health. I would suggest or recommend that they do reach out to Chief Jackson. I can also talk with Chief Jackson, and you know, there needs to be, and maybe set something up for the future to have someone come in, you know, annually or biannually, and come up with something.
Like almost like an internship or something could be added into part of their curriculum from JCC, as you have to do so many hours working clinical hours in the mental health field to become part of the police academy or police force here in Jamestown. I don't know if that's something. And I mean, it seems to me that we have like 3 different kinds of mental health places that people can go in Jamestown. Do people actually know which places? Like you have the Chautauqua Center, which is, you know, on what road is that?
We're on
Institute.
We're on Institute. So you're right, Missy. What MHA offers is different than what we offer.
Yeah.
And there's maybe a little cheat sheet that our organizations could create to give to the police, just in terms of making referrals or knowing who to call if they want help. We could also come up with a cheat sheet because all of these trainings are available in our community, and most likely they would be offered for free. I can't say for sure, but things like the implicit bias trainings and some that Linnea mentioned, we have the resources in our community to offer that. We just need to make those plans and connections. But the only other thing that I thought of while you guys were talking, especially what Jeff said, is from my experience in healthcare, trainings are a place where people come together and they do receive the training of the material, but they also have a chance to really talk through scenarios and ask questions and create a dialogue with the trainer or the mental health organizations. So even having an opportunity to go off-site, off of the police force grounds to another location where the can really talk to people and ask other questions that maybe the training would create, as opposed to doing like an online training where you just push buttons and it's over. Those kinds of like biannual dialogue sessions might help as much as the training.
I'm going to just chime in.
It's like,
oh, who's first?
Go ahead,
I'll
Carol.
just chime in for a second. I think that, you know, just like with anything else, training is important for all of us, but I think being a greater presence in the community, just in general, getting to know people, not being there as we talk about, I don't know how this is possible, especially when you look at all the trends that nobody really wants to be a social worker anymore, and nobody really wants to be a police officer anymore, as part of whatever's happened in our community. So, and I'm just, you know, making a wild statement there to some extent, but being involved in the community is how being exposed to populations I don't know, being exposed to people I don't know, things I don't know, is what creates relationship for me and gives me a greater understanding. And right now, that's the one piece that's missing. Why don't we why don't we call the police when we're on the side of the road? Because even I, and I'll say as a white female, get uncomfortable when the police pull me over and I don't really do anything wrong. And not that everyone does who's getting pulled over, but you don't think about that first. But if they were present in my life every day in some way, interacting with me, like that's totally different. And I think that creates new relationships where people begin to understand that all police officers are not bad. You know, they are doing a lot to protect our community, when something goes wrong. I want them there if I'm in danger, for sure. But wanting them there for other reasons, if it's a low level danger, how do we get to that point? And that's how I think relationship gets built.
I'll
Agree more
I'll
with
share something real quick with you. When you know, several times it's been mentioned about fear of the police. There were several times in my career where a parent would bring their child into the front doors of the police station and they would ask to talk to a uniformed officer. And there was a couple times where I stepped out to talk to a parent, and the parent asked me or wanted me to scare their child. They wanted me to say, you know, if you don't do this or you don't do this, you know, you can go to jail, you can get locked up. And I looked at these parents and I told them, absolutely, I will not do that. You know,
Right.
it shouldn't be, you know, a fear factor. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I never like inspired, you know, as a small child to be a police officer. I wasn't sitting there my whole life saying, I want to be a cop, you know? And it just kind of happened, I guess. You know, life takes you in certain ways, but we have to, I guess, get past that stigma of fear of the police. And I blame a lot of that, and I'm getting off topic, but I blame a lot of that on media and social media. Of course, you know, media wants ratings and they want to put everything that's bad out there because that's, you know, that's getting the clicks and everything else. And there's a lot of things that often go on that are positive that it just goes unreported. And I've told other people, I'm not going to sit here and try to defend every single police officer in the United States because that would be ridiculous. Or I just know how I carried myself as a police officer in the way I did my job, and I felt that I did it well, and I elected to stay in the community. You were talking about you know, connecting with the community. I could have moved outside the city, but I felt that if I was good enough to collect a paycheck from the citizens of Jamestown, then I should reside here and be part of my neighborhood. You know, and that worked out well for me in my job. There was many situations that I was involved in that were mental health situations that they were very, very, honestly, they were very scary to me, where I had to make split-second decisions whether I was going to take someone's life or not. And I think as a result of being part of this community, and sheerly by the grace of my God, I didn't have to make that decision, or I did not make that decision. And by the grace of God, it worked out. So we do need to collaborate. In closing, we do need to collaborate more so with the mental health community. I mean, you talked about being a social worker. My daughter just got her MSW, and she's a social worker at a school down in Florida. My brother, Patrick Russell, has his master's degree and has worked in the mental health field for many, many years down at Bradford, Jones Hill. He's been all over. So we have some interesting chats sometimes on things.
If I could comment on the social media part of that. Yeah, social media can be detrimental to public image, but I think that it can also be a useful tool to display the good things that are happening if we put more of an effort into showing the transparency and highlighting these stories of police officers doing good things in our community.
Yeah, I'm curious, is there, you know, I'm just thinking about when I worked at the GA home, which is no longer an organization, but you know, all of the kids, their first time seeing a police officer was when he had his knee on their back on the ground. And, you know, they were called for mental health crisis issues. And, you know, so I'm just curious if there currently is any youth police programs, interactions, you know, anything structured that, because I think that's a big key is, you know, going into the schools and having positive events, you know, so when the children see a police officer on the street, or they are called for a crisis with that child's family, or, you know, for any instance, they already know that police officer. They're not intimidated by them. They're, you know, oh, there's my friend who is here to help me. So
I've worked in the schools for years. I still work in the schools, even after being retired. Actually, I was working this morning at JHS. After I retired, New York State passed a law where school districts could hire retired police officers, because we still have certification and we could be in the schools. So I've had contact with kids my entire career, just chatting in the halls, you know, not, you know, quote, police contact, but yes, police contact. And it helped me out greatly in my job, because sometimes I would run into these kids outside of school, you know, maybe when their parents were having a domestic, you know, and they saw a familiar face. Also, I know Chief Jackson is starting in January. He's implementing a Big Brother and Big Sister program, utilizing police officers. I've just always gravitated towards kids. Prior to being a police officer, I worked at Randolph Children's Home. So I worked with, you know, inner city youth from Buffalo. I mean, I worked with kids anywhere from the sex offender to, you know, a kid that was, you know, robbing the dominoes, Buffalo, wide gamut, and kids with mental illness as well. So I've just always gravitated towards that. So there are, I mean, I know Chief Jackson is starting that program, the Big Brother, Big Sister program. The other thing that he's starting that we used to have years ago was a Citizens Police Academy. And years ago, you could sign up as a citizen. It was just one night a week for 4 or 5 hours in the evening. And basically, they taught you about, you know, the inner workings of the police station and being a police officer in Jamestown. And they had multiple instructors that would come in and talk about different topics. And you, if you felt comfortable, you even went downstairs on the indoor range and you could shoot a gun if you wanted to. So that's going to be reintroduced through Chief. So there's some big changes coming at the police station. And I think that goes along with the new leadership that's in place.
Yeah, back to
when everybody.
go ahead. Go ahead, Vicki. You've been.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on what Jeff was saying. You know, and he talked about earlier about collaborating, and I think the things that Chief Jackson is going to be implementing is a great way for not only for the police department to get involved with the mental health community, but the mental health community to get involved with the police department. So so when he has things going on, that to make sure that you get the information and that that people from mental health community can be a part of the things that the police department has done. It's a two-way street, and because we're all in it together. We're all So I've been telling each group, we're all in this together. So the more that we get involved with each other's work, the better outcome we're going to have, more success we're going to have in this venture.
Yeah, that's why, I kind of brought up, what are the options at Chautauqua Center? What are the options at Chautauqua County Mental Health? What are the options at MHA? Does the community know that all of these resources are out there, and how can those three, units collaborate as one even? Or, are you going to get a medical professional if you go to Chautauqua County Mental Health? Are you going to get a professional or a psychiatrist if you go to MHA? What are the steps, and what kind of line of work do we offer at these programs? And I think that that's where the confusion comes in, is that as a child, I went to Chautauqua County Mental Health with my mother. That's where she would go for counseling. That was the only option that there was in Jamestown. Now you have MHA, which is Mental Health Association, where I think that there's a lot of confusion with people in the community, that they just see the word mental health and they're like, oh, okay, I got to go there, or I got to go over here, and referrals, and where do people get sent? And that's, I think, part of where the police need to come in, is what options are there for them to use these programs?
Well, Missy, I think what you're referring to, you're very right. There's a concept called health literacy, and it has to do with people's basic understanding of resources, people's understanding of terminology, and then their willingness to receive help or to get help.
Yes.
And our area has a very low level of health literacy. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the fact. And as organizations, we need to do a better job at explaining to people what's available. And I think this group is a great example of people coming together, because we tend to operate in our silos, and we don't necessarily have resources to do the kinds of marketing that you would need to get everyone in James the difference between MHA and the Chautauqua Center. But maybe what we've talked about today is the need for a community outreach plan that explains what these resources are on the preventative side, so that things don't always have to lead to a crisis and involve the police. You know, like someone said, the police should be the last resort. And what's Steve does at MHA, or what we do here, or Misty, those resorts can come in before the crisis. So as a community, you know, we could really do a better job of addressing the preventative side of substance abuse and mental health. And that might take some of the pressure off of the police. So I know the Chautauqua Center, we're ready and willing to work together in any way that we can to help this situation.
To piggyback off of that, I just wonder, has there been talks of a specific like mental health crisis response unit as a part of the JPD? Because I feel like you can train the police, but they're never going to be professionals. Like, I feel like there should be at least somebody that's a professional working alongside them to help them make the right decisions.
Right, there has been some discussion of that. We did have a series of meetings this summer. Steve was involved with those meetings, as well as a couple of representatives from the Department of Mental Hygiene. And it was, a lot of it was really spurred on by the Jamestown Justice Coalition. But, you know, a lot of the things that they were.
So,
go ahead, Vic.
So,
you know,
President.
No, I was just going to say, you know, sorry, Brent. You know, that's what the whole, you know, the whole summer, you know, when this whole thing started with George Floyd, you know, and the term that freaked people out, defund the police, you know, that this is exactly what they were talking about, defunding the police. It was talking about adding, you know, these other pieces to the police department. It wasn't talking about, you know, people took it literally as go in and just take money from the police and, you know, get rid of police departments. And that was not the whole purpose. That's not what that defund the police department meant. It was just to go in, see what monies is being spent in the police department. And, you know, is there something in there that maybe they really don't need all that money in there, and maybe they could bring in some mental health, maybe they can bring in social workers, maybe they can bring in some other kind of entity, you know, to help them do their job, you know, to be so that everybody can be better at what they're doing and serve the public better. So, you know, and it was just very unfortunate that, you know, some people just took that term and literally, you know, when you hear defund, you know, that means, you know, automatically you think about, you know, we're just going to break it down and, you know, close them down, you know, and that was totally not the, you know, the purpose for that term.
Steve, did you want to add something about the meetings we had?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the crisis response. There is a crisis response apparatus in Chautauqua County, and there are discussions about changing it and making it more responsive and perhaps better. So those discussions are ongoing. I think from a personal point of view, really believe that there are just some things that the police shouldn't do that are related to mental health and substance abuse issues that we ask them to do now. They're just not the right tool to fix that situation. And they do an amazing job going into some of these situations where, as Jeff pointed out, they probably have very little training how to respond to that. So I'm optimistic and hopeful those changes are already happening. I also think it's really important to, the more I've gotten to know individual police officers, the less afraid I've become of the police. And I've even gotten to know some of them to make a judgment as to whether they're good police officers or bad police officers. But one of the things we've been able to do here at the MHA, although not recently because of COVID, was as a recovery community, we've been able to invite people in recovery who've had bad experiences, or not bad experiences, but have had experiences with police where they've been arrested, to be able to sit down and have lunch with police officers or probation officers. And those are really powerful moments when folks can sit down and get to know each other as people, as human beings, instead of an offender and an enforcer. So I think if we look at police reform, we really need to be conscious where we can plan for specific opportunities where police are able to interact with the citizens of the community in ways that isn't a response situation, because that's a completely different situation. Sometimes I think living in a small community or rural communities where the police are forced almost to respond and be in cars, that works against us, because I've had the opportunity to live in big cities where, the police feel more accessible because you're riding the bus or riding the subway, or you see them on the corner and you have conversations with them. But I think we need to be really proactive in planning for those times where police and citizens, whether it's folks with a mental health, mental illness issues or a substance use disorder, or just regular citizens, where they can actually interact together and get to know each other. I think that is essential, and I don't think we always do that now as a community. So yeah, that's, I guess I'd really like to thank Jeff for making a conscious decision as a police officer in the city of Jamestown to live in the city of Jamestown. I believe it's essential, and I think it should be a requirement that police officers, if they're working for an agency, they should live within the jurisdiction of that agency, because I believe that creates a completely different dynamic. And so, Jeff, thank you very much for consciously deciding to do that.
Yeah,
is that already in the works? Sorry, not to cut you off. Isn't that already in the works for them to be living in the city?
Yeah, the city council is trying to come up with something, correct, Brent?
It's been discussed. We haven't passed a law at this point, but it will be discussed more in the future.
It's a tough one. I personally feel that the law enforcement should be the nucleus of every community, and then you branch off of that, and whatever branches you need, you put those into place where they need to be. I think the police, I think there's more and more JPD that don't live in the area, and I agree with Steve that I think that they should live in the area. I think that it's easier for them to know their community when they live in the area. To serve and protect, you got to know who you're serving and protecting, I think.
What is it, Jeff? 20 to 25% of the officers live in Jamestown currently?
Around 25%. And, for transparency, I mean, I used to get into some battles on the job when I was still working, and even being on city council with some of my former union people and some of my coworkers, that And I know the new chief is very, he was born and raised here in Jamestown, been here his whole life. And he's the same way. We both feel that, you should live in the community where you're working. I mean, you can't, and the argument with some of the officers is, well, I run into some people that I incarcerate, I've been harassed. I'm worried about my family. And I get all that. And there is some of that is somewhat true. I mean, there's been a couple times in my career where, I was outside doing yard work and a guy came by and I didn't know who he was and he had some choice words for me. There was another time where I was off duty and I was harassed at Home Depot. But I mean, the other thing that, that could be said about any career. I mean, people in the mental health field could be dealing or be, off duty per se. And someone could say something to them so I don't always buy that excuse. I mean, this is just where I was raised and I just felt that as long as I was here getting it checked and I should be here. And I've had my neighbors tell me that, thank you for living here. I feel more safe that you're next door, or I've had my neighbors come to me, when they might've been involved in a domestic with their spouse and they just want someone to talk to. And I'm not even working or I've retired and I have people that still knock on my door, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that.
All right, we'll do one final questionnaire. We've had a lot of input on this already, but what are some of the other ways that you feel we can improve policing in Jamestown and build better relationships within the community?
Hi, I'd like to say something about this. This is Misty from Chautauqua County Department of Mental Hygiene. I can tell you that the collaboration between JPD and, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Has been really great. We've collaborated. They've reached out to us on multiple occasions when they needed assistance in dealing with individuals who either had chronic, mental illness or substance abuse issues. I can tell you that the JPD officers all carry the emergency services guides, as well as the someone had mentioned earlier about putting together a resource list that lists all of the local providers. And our department has done that. It has all of our community partners listed on that, and JPD as well as Dunkirk Police and the sheriffs have access to that. And I know that they hand those out to individuals as they encounter them. So I think the fact that they've been willing to do that and offering individuals that they come in contact with that helpful information is something that's going to improve community relations with police officers.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jeff, you had mentioned the older officers or the more senior officers being able to have a good influence on new incoming officers. One suggestion I would make that we do in healthcare a lot is like a mentor program, an actual formalized mentor program where I know money is limited, but theoretically an officer who's been in good standing that has shown good instincts and community unbiased behaviors could potentially be nominated to be a mentor. That person could even have a slight pay increase for their role as a mentor. And then that person would be available to talk to officers that are dealing with a challenging scenario or to talk through what went wrong and what they could have done differently. I don't know how it works on the police force, but in healthcare, that's where we've done a lot of our growth as providers, is just the chance to get the input of the people who have more experience and be able to have that dialogue within your own organization. So that would be one suggestion that might be a simple fix.
Sure. I mean, that's obviously something that could be implemented and wouldn't be that difficult to do within the department. A concern I've had since I left and when I was retiring after 23 years, there was a mass exodus over the past 3 to 5 years of a lot of police officers at JPD. You know, currently we have down there's probably been 25 to 30 police officers out of a department of 60 that has left within the last 7 or 8 years. So you have an extremely junior police department. I would say that's why it's probably your idea is I mean, take the senior people that are left and try to do that. And also, I mean, some of the trainings that we've talked about in the beginning, you know, try to have more trainings or something to dealing with mental health crises, because I mean, if you can avert, you know, one tragic incident, you know, as a police officer, legally, you might be okay legally to use excess or to use force, deadly physical force on someone, and you might be cleared legally, but I mean, if you can avert a tragedy where you don't have to take someone's life, and then also, you know, the officer has to live with that choice for the rest of their life too. I mean, I have a very good friend of mine who had to take a life as a deputy in Georgia. And, you know, not only was the life lost, and the person was in a mental health crisis. She was called to the house. She wasn't provided with enough information by a dispatcher about the situation. And she walked into a house and was talking to the mother of the individual. And the individual came running down the stairs with a shotgun and pointed at my friend who was a deputy. And the deputy had to use deadly physical force to save her own life. And, you know, not only did this other person lose their life, who was in a mental health crisis, but my friend for many, many years has struggled with her own mental health stuff now as a result of having to take this person's life. You know, ended her career. It caused substance abuse issues of her own, the result, severe PTSD. So, I mean, if we can get the mental health community on board to work with the police as much as we can, it's a no-brainer.
Jeff, you and I had a conversation before about even the social and mental health services for those police officers when they go through those kind of circumstances, you know, debriefing how long, like after someone, I mean, I know after someone shoots someone, they probably, you know, have a little bit of time off, I would hope. But what happens if you go and someone's having a severe mental breakdown and you have to go in and try to figure out how to deal with this situation, you know, and things could happen that you've never been even seen in your life before, you know, like, I mean, I've witnessed someone having a nervous breakdown. It's not pretty. I've actually had a nervous breakdown myself. It's not pretty. Well,
I for what you and I talked about, Missy, I mean, I have, you know, there's a stigma.
Stigma. I like that word, stigma.
There's stigma with police officers, or there's a fear for some police officers. I saw it, to reach out for their own help. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, the mental health of police officers. I mean, you want police officers to be, you know, physically fit for the job, but you also want them mentally fit for the job.
Right.
And I, despite, you know, working in this small community, you know, it's not New York City or Chicago, I've seen some horrible stuff that sticks with me. And one thing that I would like to see more of is more mental health stuff for police officers in the area. I mean, when I was at JPD, basically the only thing that was offered to us was the EAP program. And there were officers that didn't even trust that because they felt that it really wasn't confidential. I know there's a number assigned to you and your name's not used, but there was a lot of officers that wouldn't utilize that because they still felt that people could find out that they had utilized that service. And, you know, but that's a whole nother topic about providing police officers with mental health services for themselves. I mean, because if you don't have, if a police officer is struggling, whether it be with a divorce or issues on the job or whatever, you know, that's going to affect their work as well. I mean, I've seen it.
I would like to comment on something you just mentioned. Just because something is like legal in the use of force or the use of deadly force is legal in the eyes of the officer, but it may not be ethical. I just was curious, do officers receive any sort of ethics training or anything like that?
Well, there's ethics classes that you take. There's ethics stuff that you get while you're in the academy. Depending on what department you work for, I mean, you have to take polygraph tests. Obviously now there's body cameras on everything. And I mean, as far as deadly physical force, I mean, there's a whole use of force scale. If someone is running at you with a butcher knife, saying they're going to kill you and you're a police officer, you're probably not going to sit there and try to verbally negotiate with them. And are you going to try to play ethics with them when they're running at you with a butcher knife? No, you're not. I mean, you might have to end up using deadly physical force. I had a situation where a young man, an adolescent, had a butcher knife to his brother's throat, and that's what I walked into. And this kid was having obviously some mental issues, and I couldn't back out of the situation. But then it became verbal judo. It came with years of experience. I had 17 years on the experience, and it came down to negotiating with him. But in like your situation, what you're saying, I mean, legally, I could have used deadly physical force against him. Okay, he was threatening to cut his 7-year-old brother's throat, and I could have used deadly physical force. There's several reasons I won't talk about now, but why I didn't. But then it came down to years of experience, and I had a partner that was with me that had many years of experience on de-escalating him, basically not to injure his brother. And like I said before, that's one of those situations, by the grace of God, God put me and my partner in that situation, and maybe not someone else, to de-escalate that situation.
I was thinking specifically about the Jacob Blake situation. I understand that the cop in that instance, it was probably, he needed to use that deadly force, but I don't think he needed to shoot the guy 7 times. It's just like, sometimes I feel like certain police officers maybe were not properly vetted or not, shouldn't have been police officers.
Right. Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't follow every single police shooting in the United States all the time, especially now that I'm retired. But I will tell you this, that 7 rounds can be shot out of a handgun extremely fast, very, very fast. And the way that police officers are trained is if you have to use deadly force, it's not like the movies where you shoot 1 round and then you look to see what happened and then you shoot another round. That's not the way it works. Unfortunately, you have to you shoot until the deadly physical force being used against you has ceased.
Okay.
I have just one question that's kind of diverting from what we've been talking about, but going back to the training that police are taken through, who puts that training together? Is it the county sheriff's office? Is there an oversight committee? Because I'm just thinking about, is there a way for us to evaluate what the culture is within our own police department in terms of language that is utilized and specific, training techniques that are implemented. And I'll be honest, I'm thinking of this because and I'm not in any way implying that this is occurring in our county, but there was a recent investigative journalism report that came out that showed that a lot of police training is utilizing biased and discriminatory language. There was one police unit in Kentucky that up until last year was utilizing Hitler quotes in their training. And again, I'm not in any way implying that that's happening here, but I'm just curious if there is any oversight into what exactly the language and culture that is utilized in the training. Because there could be, small things that we don't even think of that are, microaggressions or, stigmas against those with mental health issues that we just are overlooking.
The trainings, the trainings aren't put on just strictly, by the police. There's all kinds of outside entities that put trainings together, and they're offered to officers. I mean, I've taken trainings on, like PTSD that weren't necessarily, cumulative PTSD that wasn't necessarily put on strictly by police. I mean, there was people from the mental health field that put that on, or stuff on sex trafficking that's not necessarily put on by the police. So there are some trainings that are put on by the Sheriff's Academy, and then there's other trainings that are put on through DCJS, through New York State in general, that are offered. So I guess to answer your question, it's multiple entities that offer this training. So I guess I would say I would refute what you're saying as far as possible things like microaggression. If the training was only coming from one place, I would say, yeah, that could be a concern, but they're getting it from multiple entities. So I don't see that as being an issue.
Can I just chime in for a second?
Yes.
Sure.
So ironically, I'm going to go back to 2006, and I had at one point in time, you probably can't see this, but I had been trained in the police mental health recruit curriculum, and it was Office of Mental Health, and we were in there for 16 weeks, and it went through every diagnosis and how to de-escalate situations. There was a paired mental health and police officer team. I don't know if that's still at the Sheriff's Academy, but I just opened the manual as I was sitting here, and it went through every diagnosis, every situation, the 941 law, all of those things. And so there was lots of training. In addition, at one point in time, and I can't even remember what this is, I was also paired live with the Jamestown Police Department with a police officer, where the social worker was the police officer and the police officer was the social worker. And there was lots of scenarios and role plays where we went in on a scene. The first thing I realized when I'm holding the gun is I'm banging it into the wall because it's way heavier than I thought. And then when he wasn't noticing things live, like there's this going on that I can see, it was a cross training. I don't remember what that was, but I think that's a lot of what we're talking about right now. And it was, I think it was beneficial, and there were 2 of us trained. And so they did have right in the Sheriff's Academy a full 9 to, I think it was either 10 weeks or 15 weeks that we were there doing that.
And that was in that was in 2006.
2006. I have the manual still and all the tapes and everything.
Like
and,
I said,
all the handouts for the officers and everything we did with the stuff there. So, and a lot of it I think is pertinent to today. So,
yeah, like I said, it's it's been 25 years since I went through the academy, so there's obviously been a lot of changes, and that sounds like it's something that's extremely positive.
Okay, we are at 3:15. We've gone over time, but that's okay. We've had some great discussion and insight into these issues here. I want to thank everybody for their time and their participation. We will be trying to reach out to you as we move along with police reform, because part of the police reform is having the stakeholders be ambassadors for police reform. So we'll be reaching out to you, giving you some more information in the future as this issue moves along, and we try to create a better police department here in Jamestown.
Yeah, Brent, if I can just add, I added this before. If anyone wants to reach out to me, as a city councilman or even, as a retired police officer, if you want to expand on any of this or have another conversation or talk about something that, you're comfortable talking about in the group here, I am available anytime you want. My phone number, I'll give it to you real quick if anyone's got a pen and they want to write it down. It's 499-5446. And if I don't answer, leave a message. I'll get back to you.
And Brett, can I just ask that you and Councilman Jeff and the mayor stay on the line after this is over with?
Sure.
Thank you.
And then Brent, I did answer all those questions. Do you want those emailed to you, or if we didn't get a chance to talk about them?
Yeah, sure. We could do that.
Okay, because I worked hard on them. I want to.
We didn't get all the questions.
I worked really hard on those questions to make sure I was ready for this meeting.
Well, yeah, we didn't have time. We had good conversation anyway.
We did. We had a great. I feel very, very good about this group. It seems like we have a lot of diversity in this group. Seems pretty even, women against the men or the men against the women. Who's smarter? Who's But I feel like we have a good mix here, and I personally feel that mental health is a very, very important task that we need to hit the hammer on the nail, right on the head, and get that fixed.
I want to thank you for inviting me to this, because this has been very informative for me. I mean, I always worked, from a business office perspective, but this has been very informative for me, and it gave me a lot to think about, and I appreciate that.
Well, we could be your first Zoom call, Chris.
Yes.
Yes.
Yay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Look forward to
afternoon.
next time.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
Yep.